Hello. Good afternoon. How is everyone doing?
Hello.
Doing well, thank you.
Hi. Welcome, Tim. Let's see. This is FutureFeed training session number 1 for end users. Has anyone sat through this training before, or would this be your first time?
First time.
Yeah, first time.
Same.
Okay. Cool. Have kind of new to the tool or been using it a while?
New to the tool.
About 2 hours.
Okay.
Also new here.
Awesome. Hi, Lisa. Welcome. All right, so I think we can get started. My name is Rachel Leidy. I'm the Director of Cyber Education here at FutureFeed, and I lead these training sessions. I'm also working on putting together some instructional videos and some knowledge-based articles and user manuals. Those should be released here in the next couple weeks, and when I release them, I will make an announcement. Can you guys see my screen? Future feed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So when I release them, I'll make an announcement and you'll get a pop-up or a future feed announcement pop-up or a little notification up here that that's been released. Okay. Other educational stuff you have available to you is in future feed. Every page has these getting started guides. So, and they're different. These getting started guides are, it's specific to the page that you're in. So here's manage users. And if I go over to manage roles and I click on that, now we're talking about what are roles, why does it matter, what type of roles should you be logging, that type of stuff. So every page has that getting started guide. So if you have some questions, check out that. Another reference you have is our help center. Okay, so if you click on your user icon in the top right corner, there, go to help center. It will bring you. Oh, I thought I'm getting some feedback. 1 second. Okay, so it will bring you to this help center, and this is where we're going to post all those knowledge-based articles, videos, user guides. There's material in there now, so still a good place to look for answers or guidance. Okay, and see here I have to sign in. So just note that when you get to this website, make an account and sign in. It's a future feed website, so just make a separate account, and then when you come to this website, try to make sure to see if you're, or log in, and then you'll have access to all of the material. Okay. Some more help we have is the training session you're in right here, right now. There's a second part to this training, and whenever you are ready to sign up and sit through that second session and, learn all that new data, just go ahead and sign up for that second session whenever it works for you, or you can sign up for this session again, or maybe you want to wait some time and take what we learned and talk about today and apply it. And then when you're ready to start the second half, go ahead and sign up. But this is being recorded, so after I end the call today, you'll get a link to the recording so you could watch it again. When you log into FutureFeed, if you scroll down to the bottom, the first registration link here is just going to bring you to our training page, which is where you would go to sign up for, the next session. And this second registration link here, this is for open office hours with me every Thursday. It's a recurring session, okay? So it happens every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, and I start it every week. And so I would recommend you just sign up for that and then just join the weeks that you have questions or that you need some guidance, because then you'll be meeting with me and I can help you through some stuff. But a lot of folks join and we end up just kind of talking about the requirements and CMMC if there's not, any FutureFeed related questions. It's a good session. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and you guys feel free to interrupt me as I'm going through this, or you could use the chat room and, type up your questions, and I will check that occasionally. Okay. So today we're going to review this dashboard area together, and then we'll review start, talk about people, tools, and documents, and then we're going to stop there. In the second session, we cover assessing, system security plan, POAM management, and deliverables. Okay, so today we're just going to work all the way up to the document section and stop there. All right, so in the dashboards area, you have this compliance dashboard, just a real nice, semi-interactive chart here that I could drill down to the family and then all the way down to the assessment objective level for the requirements. See some status, inheritance, score, all that stuff. Then we have this assessment prep center. So what this is a new addition, and I'll show you how it works. But first, let me tell you how I would use it and kind of the thought behind it is FutureFeed generates for you automatically in the background your system security plan. And, there's some triggers and things that happen that generate and populate your system plan of action, your POAM. And the system security plan and your system POAM, as well as the assess area here, are pretty important areas and information for an assessment. Okay, so before you go into an assessment, either an internal or external assessment, we recommend that you review, the information that's in FutureFeed to ensure that what's in there is accurate and that the system security plan that's going to be populated is accurate and your system POAM is accurate. Okay. So this is where you would track and assign different sections of FutureFeed. You would assign the different sections to FutureFeed to someone at your company. Okay, so for example, contract manager, there's a section in FutureFeed where you list out your contracts that the company holds. And you may not be aware of any, what those contracts are. And so you want your contract manager or your contracting officer or sales department to review that information or populate that information, edit it to make sure it's accurate. So you would assign that section of FutureFeed to that individual. You could see here we've done in the past. So I'll use this one, for example. I'll get it assigned to someone. Okay. And these are all different sections of FutureFeed listed here. And you could click on them and you'll go to that section. Okay, so let's go to that contract manager section. And I'm going to just clear this all out quick. So yours is going to be empty, right? Now that last page that we were just on, the assessment prep center, that correlates to this field here. This directly fills out that page. Okay, so here is the contract manager section, and you can see it lists out our cage code, and it would list out the contracts your company has. And so maybe I want to give that to Carrie because Carrie's my contract officer. So I want her, she's assigned this page. She needs to, populate it or review it or edit it. And then she would log in, mark it reviewed. Okay, it's tracking my name because I checked it, but if she clicked the box, it would put Carrie's name here. And then even you could track reviewal. If you check the approved box, you could put your initials in there, okay? So you could assign the page to someone, you could have someone review it, you can have someone approve it. When you mark it approved, captures initials. This whole field here relates directly to this assessment prep center. So now if I go down to that contract manager page, it's been approved by me today, July 15th. Okay? And so that's how you would use this page. Critical dates, another project management tool. Okay, in here, this is specific to CMMC, NIST 800-171, and it would be planning the, milestone goal dates for, the whole CMMC process from when you're starting to work on the requirements and prepping for that assessment. And then when do you want to have that C3PAO assessment? Okay, after you had the assessment, were there findings? And if there were, you have 180 days to remediate and revalidate those requirements. So you'll have to track that date. Okay, when did you get your assessment? And it's triennial assessments. And so when should you start planning and prepping for that next CMMC assessment? Okay. Last two areas in the dashboard area is responsibilities. You have team responsibilities and individual responsibilities. So anybody who has access to your FutureFeed environment will be listed here in this team section. Okay, so you could go ahead and see let's see what Jill has assigned to her. Jill, she's working on a lot of these security control requirements, has a bunch of tools and security documentation assigned to her in the RACI model. Here's her tasks. Looks like a bunch are past due. And here's the poem items she has. She has some poem projects she's part of, and she has poem individual items assigned to her. Okay. Now, if I change the user, go back to me, here's mine. And so all throughout FutureFeed, we're using the RACI model, RACI, this RACI model for assignment of responsibility. R stands for responsible, who's the team or person or role that's responsible for doing something or that thing. A is accountable, who's ultimately the person accountable at that organization to make sure, that requirement is implemented or that document is being developed and maintained. C, consulted, who internal or external to the company needs to be consulted on things. And then I, same thing, is informed, who internal, external to the company needs to be informed for that item. So everywhere you're going to see the RACI model, so you can very clearly track responsibility for your compliance management program. Okay. Any questions about this dashboard area before we move on?
Nope, all set.
Okay. So now the rest of the training is, just our recommended approach to populating the data in FutureFeed and setting yourself up to do a internal assessment of the data you put into FutureFeed and really building out that system security plan. And so I'm going to talk about my approach if you're brand new to FutureFeed and your environment's completely empty. How FutureFeed recommends approaching, starting to work and populating is to work first here in this start area. That's why we named it start. This is the start subway stop. You can see a lot of this information. It's very high level. It's, talking about the company. You start defining the system at a high level, the system name, system description, boundary description. You call out the cage code or cage codes your company has and the different contracts and the contract clauses that are present that are driving the need for CMMC or NIST 800-171 or FCI level 1. You have a data inventory area. This is where you're identifying for your FutureFeed environment, for this environment you're depicting in FutureFeed. Is it storing, processing, or transmitting FCI and CUI? We'll get into all of these here in a second, and then you have some settings. So we recommend you start here, work through these, try to get as much as this filled out. Go through, you could use this compliance review section, and if there's pages that you don't know, you don't have that information, you need to, bring someone to the conversation, or maybe you want that person to log in and actually do the work, then use this little box here to get it assigned to someone and have them start working on it. They'll get notification when they have an assignment. And then after you populate start, then we recommend moving on to people and start identifying individual people involved in your security management, processes and controls, and then defining the roles that are involved, assigning people to those roles, then defining the teams that are involved and assigning either people or roles to those teams. Okay, and this is essential because when you get into the tools, documents, assess, pretty much everywhere else, you start to assign RACI responsibility. And if you want to be able to tag your CFO as accountable under a requirement, you have to define the CFO as a role in FutureFeed and put someone in that role so they can get alerts when they have assignments, okay? After you fill out people, then you start populating FutureFeed with your tools, your technology, all of the technology that your company is, owns or manages or even operates. But maybe it's provided by an external, third party provider, or it's up in the cloud. Your company's still operating and utilizing those information systems to store, process, and transmit data or protect and control access to that data. So start defining that technology, operating systems, hardware, servers, endpoints, printers, network devices. Don't forget about those, firewalls, switches. Major software also should be identified, like CRM tools, like HubSpot. When I say major software, I'm talking about software that stores, processes, and transmits data. And so what is that data and how is it protected? So the big softwares like like JobBoss and HubSpot and FutureFeed. FutureFeed would be in that category, okay? So after you identify the tools and you log them into FutureFeed, then you start connecting the tools to the requirements. Okay, you're starting to build out that body of evidence. For example, if the requirement says you have to do vulnerability scanning, then you would link that requirement to your vulnerability scanning entry in FutureFeed. And you're building out that evidence that, yes, we're doing vulnerability scanning. When I get to that part, when I start assessing our implementation and assessing the compliance and building out my SSP, I'm going to say, yes, we do vulnerability scanning. And the tool we use is Nessus. And I'm gonna already have a connection for that requirement to my Nessus entry because I did it here when I entered my tool. So just start working on building out those connections between the tool entry and the requirements. Same thing for documents. Then we say to, after you get the people defined, you defined your assets, then start working on your security documents. What security documents does your current company currently have regarding computer data security, and start logging them? Access control policies, technical control plans, standard operating procedures, that kind of stuff. Policies, procedures, worksheets. We have them different categories here, so you would break them up and log them in the appropriate category, okay? But you'll start logging those. Incident response plan, you can see here. And then as you're logging the security documentation, you're going to do that same thing of connecting the document to the requirements. So here I've connected my incident response plan document to 361, which is the incident response plan requirement. Okay, so again, I'm building out my body of evidence. As I'm working in this document area, I'm listing out my documents and linking them to the requirements. And now, after that point, which is where we will stop today, then you go on to assess. And you start evaluating and assessing your implementation and your compliance. And when you get to this point, if you approach it like we recommend, you will have established connections between tools and the people who are RACI involved, and the requirements, and you would have established connections between the documents and the people involved and the requirements. And so when you're evaluating your requirements now, you should have some attached evidence down below under the examine. Here's where your documents show up, and the test is where your technology show up. And so it's going to help you be able to evaluate, is the limit of unsuccessful logon attempts defined? Well, what documents did we connect? And does my access control policy really say that? Let's look at it. Well, I'll have to pull it up. And does my tool here, what tool enforces it? And is it compliant? And let's pull it up and look at a configuration baseline screenshot, or maybe a screenshot of that limit of unsuccessful logon attempts. See here. And so you're building these connections, and then you can, build out this summary notes and kind of paint that picture of how this requirement's being implemented if you don't already have that. Mark things met, not met. Identify where the gaps are. You'll be able to create poems, and then at that point in time, your systems, once you complete your assessment of all the requirements, look at your SSP. It's going to be pretty well filled out. It's going to have that company information, the system information, status of the requirements. Things that are marked not met will have a poem. Things that are marked met are going to have that connected document evidence or tool evidence. After you review your SSP, you're going to move on to start working in your system poems. So everything that you identified as a flaw or a gap issue, it's gonna you would have at that point created a system poem entry for it, and now they're listed here, and you're gonna start working on those issues and create projects to get that activity moving. Over in deliverables is where you can generate reports and presentations on any of the data you put into FutureFeed. So if you want to report on RACI assignment, like roles and not roles, responsibility assignment, you can do that. You can present your SSP. If you want to just present poem metrics, just click on poem metrics. It's a real simple way to build out a report. Think of all of these here. It's pulling from a different section in FutureFeed. This poem, all these poem metrics here that would show up are all being pulled from the poem. Okay. And that's generally, so that is FutureFeed's recommended approach to populating, conducting an internal assessment, making sure you have poems created and your SSP is accurate and the requirements are assessed accurately and you have evidence. That's our approach. Now, if you're coming and you're starting to use FutureFeed and you're already at the point where you hired someone to do maybe a gap assessment and you just want to take their results and jump straight to the assess page and start, copying and pasting their results maybe in here and then working on collecting that evidence and then linking the evidence and uploading it into FutureFeed afterward. Like, you can approach FutureFeed however you want. There's nothing you have to complete fully before you can start working on something else. So, okay, with that being said, let's briefly skim through this start area. A lot of it is pretty self-explanatory and just not too much to cover, but let me know if you have questions, okay? And I'm gonna just scroll through it fast. So, one thing I'll call out is this area here, risk appetite. So what you're doing here is you're identifying your company's approach to handling risk. Are you really risk adverse, or are you willing to accept some risks? And so you would work with the appropriate people at your company to define what your risk appetite is and that tolerance level and that approach. And hover over the green dots to get a little more guidance if you need it. And don't forget to check that getting started guide, because it's going to cover in there, what is risk appetite and what are we trying to get at. Now, how you'll use that information then is when you're working within your system POAM and you have to try, you start prioritizing remediation efforts and different projects that need to be worked on. Well, you're going to typically prioritize that based on risk, impact, effort, cost, right? So that's how you'll use this area if you choose to use it. Company description, pretty self-explanatory again. You have a place to track cybersecurity, IT budget, and cybersecurity insurance if you hold it. If you do, what does it cover and what are your coverage dates? Locations, here's where you're going to start defining the physical locations that are in scope of the requirements that are storing, processing, or transmitting FCI or COI data. So you're starting to define your assessment scope here, which is pretty important. Just click on new locations and type in the data here. You'll see red means it's required. Then after you enter that location, go ahead and open up the location's inventory item. Okay, so at this location, using that RACI model, establish responsibility. If you're renting that location, we have a place for you to upload documents. You could upload the rental agreement, or maybe you upload like a floor plan layout for that location. You're connecting the requirements. Okay, so for location assets, pretty much you're going to go ahead and connect those requirements that require physical security. So you could search by key, like you could search by ID, like I'm doing here. So I would tag all of the 310 um, requirements. Looks like I wouldn't tag key management. And then just know you can also search by, if you're not familiar with the control ID, you could search by keyword. Okay, so let's just type in the word physical. Looks like I had them all over there. So, but access. All right. You get the point. So you would search for all those requirements you want to associate. And now I've associated this location and these physical security requirements. So that way, when I get into that assess mindset and that assess subway stop, and I'm looking for evidence and I'm looking to validate if my locations have implemented the physical security, I have that connection to my location entry. Okay. So any of the evidence that you need for a location, maybe like a physical access log or a visitor access log, you could log in this evidence folder here, and now it would be associated with that requirement. Okay, so let me know if I'm not making, if I'm not being very clear. Okay, so we're going to talk about these other fields here a little bit later when I get into tools and documents. So we're going to close out of here, and we'll go over that whole interface more in depth when we start talking about technology and documents, because it just makes for a better conversation. All right. Maintenance and ownership here. So you're defining at a high level hardware, software, maintenance, and ownership. You could see how I've typed it up. I do have, again, calling out the getting started guides. Check out these. They're in some of them, they have this compliance implications where I was trying to be helpful with, calling out the requirements and stuff like that. I also provided an example of how I would write up the narrative for these questions if you need that. Okay. Scope. Here we have scope. So you're starting to define your system name, giving it a name, type, number of users, describing the boundary and the purpose of the system. We've seen the contracts page, cage code or cage codes. You can have multiple. Identify the contracts and the clauses that are present. Okay. Now this page can be, well, one, your SSP does need to be associated with a cage code. So that is important. Contracts, I guess it would be really up to you if you want to use this page in FutureFeed. I would recommend it. And if you've not done the whole scoping conversation at your organization, meaning if you've not defined exactly what is in scope of the requirements and what is outside of scope of the requirements, you'll have to have that conversation at some point. And that conversation starts with the contracts and following that data that is brought in from that, under that contract. And so this could be a page that helps you, get into that conversation and start that conversation or start that analysis. Data inventory, again, if this environment has FCI, this is pretty simple. You're just toggling on and off what assets are FCI assets, what ones are not. When you populate the tools area in FutureFeed, all those tools that you log are going to show up here. Okay, and then you just go to them. Here's a data storage. Yes, there's FCI data in it. No, I don't have data storage in my change control tracking system or FCI data. CUI, a little bit more is going on here. So what we've done is we're just listing all of the NARA categories, and all of these hyperlink to the NARA CUI registry. Okay, so why I personally would go here, number one, is if you're wondering how to appropriately mark that type of CUI that you have. Right here, it's showing you how to do that. Okay. And it's also telling you if it's basic or specified CUI. It's also giving you some other important information you might want to look at as far as safeguarding or handling that data. Okay. So it links to the NARA website. And let's use this one as an example. So if my company was storing, processing, or transmitting DoD victim legal information, CUI information, I would need to know, is it basic or CUI specified? What box do I pick? Well, we just saw that you're picking, basic, okay? And so we're going to pick basic. Now you could leave it at the checkbox alone, and that tells me, an external person or any assessor looking at this, that somewhere in this environment, CUI basic victim data is being stored, processed, or transmitted. You can go more granular with it if you want by establishing specific IT assets as storing, processing, or transmitting that data. And that's when this wrench shows up, okay? So to do that, you do have to do that in the tools section. So you'll go find that tool that you want to associate. Jira. And in my compliance, it's a CUI asset. So I'm going to click on that CUI icon. Sorry if I'm going fast. Tell me to slow down if I'm losing you. And then I'm going to find that category. So there it is, victim basic. Okay. And if I clicked on this CUI icon here. So now when I go back to that data inventory, it's going to be a little bit more clear of a data flow image, right? So now this victim legal CUI basic data is being stored, processed, transmitted in Jira. Okay. So yes, it's in the environment but more specifically, the bulk of it is in this system or that system or this application. And it is your call if you want to get that granular. I would recommend it. That will help with your data flow diagram and analysis and scoping. Okay, so in the next, we have sensitive data. This is if your company is interested in identifying any other types of data, proprietary business data, confidential, you can even create your own data category down here, employee PI, anything else other than FCI or CUI. You could do that here. You could use this page to identify that information and, identify it as being stored, processed, or transmitted in this environment, meaning it's also protected with 801.71 security. Settings. Here, you can integrate FutureFeed with your ticketing system. Okay. If it's not enabled, to enable it, it's pretty easily. And then put that ticket system email in there. Trick here is you could put anybody's email in here. Okay. So if you don't have a ticket system, but let's say you want to create a shared inbox called the compliance management team inbox, and you want all your compliance management people from across your organization to have access to that inbox, so that that way they could see POAM updates or POAM project updates. You could do that. It's any email here. So when you enable it, where you see this feature is when I'm going to go to show you one place you'll see it. I'm going to go to the system POAM, okay? And here, this blue envelope icon, if If I click on it, I can email directly from FutureFeed my ticketing system or whatever email I put in there, a status update on this poem item here, which is for RA 11.2. So here I'm going to type up my, important status update notes and hit send. Okay. If you don't have that enabled, you're going to still see this envelope, but it's going to be grayed out and you can't click on it. And so your admin may need to enable that if they haven't done that. The last setting here is if you want, I guess a couple things, sorry. Poem goals. Okay, in FutureFeed, when you create a poem, it's going to come pre-populated with a default due date, and here's how you control that. So right now, if I made a poem today, it's going to be due 3 quarters out. That's going to be the due date. This is just default. When you create a poem, you could change the due date at that time, but it will come pre-populated, and that's how you control it. Down here, organizational scale, impact, effort, cost. What you're doing is you're basically standardizing the language of what impact, effort, and cost mean for your organization. So that way, if someone from the I don't know, physical security shop, let's just say someone from the facility security shop created a poem item in FutureFeed. Like if you want them to do that. How are they going to know what impact, effort, and cost means to everyone? And if someone from the compliance shop creates a poem, impact, effort, and cost, what does it mean to them? So here you're going to define what impact, effort, and cost is for your organization. And then everyone who has responsibility for setting or determining impact, effort, and cost for a system flaw, vulnerability issue, they're going to reference this scale so they know what to choose. Okay, so what is a low cost item to your company? $500. If you're a big company, maybe 5,000. Okay. Framework, you can choose to disable that FedRAMP warning that pops up. You do have to be an admin to do this, and I would only recommend doing this if your company does not have a FedRAMP requirement for a tool like FutureFeed. That is the start area. Any questions?
Nope. All set. Thank you.
So people, pretty straightforward here. You have to be an admin to add users. So your admin, you want to write down a list of users that you want to either have access to FutureFeed so they could use all of its ability, or maybe you don't want them to have access to FutureFeed, but you want to be able to, by name, tag them as responsible for something in the RACI matrix. Okay. You're going to need a list of everyone you want to either have access to your FutureFeed or you want to tag in FutureFeed. And you'll have to give that to the system admin for your environment. And then they're going to come in here, click add new user, select their option, and start filling out this data. The no access thing is the thing that means essentially I'm just logging that person, making a record of them in FutureFeed, but they're not going to have access to FutureFeed. But it's for RACI tagging. Let me know if that wasn't clear. So they'll go in here and you'll have to put that list and they'll go in here and start making making all those entries. Okay. Then after they do that, then you could start defining the roles, or while they're doing that, you could define the roles that need to be defined so you could tag them in the RACI model. Okay. So we have some default roles here. And if you don't want to use them, just mark them not applicable. But you'll go through and assign, who's your CEO. Now see all these names that pop up? you're not going to have any names that pop up unless they've created those accounts over here under users. So you can still create the roles, but you may not be able to tag the people like down here for until that list gets in. But then go back through, you know, and tag people, create the roles you want. My suggestion is to try to create whenever in FutureFeed, when you're tagging someone as responsible or consulted or informed, not accountable, but the other 3 objectives in the RACI model, to try to tag that responsibility to a role or a team. So that way, if they ever quit and you know that you're going to have personnel change issues and events happening throughout the years. Okay, so if my system administrator, Pam, they quit, well, everywhere in FutureFeed, when I was trying to tag someone as responsible for something in the RACI model, sorry, I'm trying to get there, in the RACI model, okay? When I did that, I would do by either a team or a role as best as possible. So that way, and when that person quits, I don't have to go and reassign a bunch of stuff. I just go in here and change out, okay, Mina took that position, we hired them. And now when Mina logs in, they're going to see everything that that last person had assigned to them and that they were working on. And it's going to be assigned to Mina. Okay. So that's my little advice, is try to do assignment by role or team. Default accountable roles. So that's, you know, the accountable objective in the RACI model. The A is the one that is going to usually either have one role or person assigned to it, not a team. Because it's ultimately the one person accountable to make sure the stuff gets done. And so you could set a default accountable. So everywhere in FutureFeed that there's a RACI matrix, the A objective will be filled out if you set it here. And you could change it, but it's nice to have at least by default someone, and then, you know, change it if you want to later. After you define the roles and get people assigned to roles, then start working on defining teams and then getting the people and the roles assigned to teams. So you'll just hit new team, add new team, give it a name, manage users, add, you know, either the role or the employee to the team, make someone a, you know, a leader, and there you're good. So just think of like everything: incident response team, HR team, department team. I would try to make teams to cover almost stuff. And then just when you, like, if someone quits, oh, HR team, Mina from HR quit, you know, just picking up that role. Populate, what this is real quick, and I've talked too much, so I got to wrap it up. What the populate button is we went through the NIST guidance real quick. I will show you because I'm a very much visual learner, and I'm sorry if it takes time up. But here, by the way, go to the DoD CIO. DoD CIO, look at the URL. If you've not been here, type in Google DoD CIO CMMC documents. You'll get here. It's pretty much a one-stop shop for everything CMMC if you've not seen this. So in here, they have assessment guides. So I'm going to click on this level 2 assessment guides. This is how any C3PAO assessor is going to be taught to train or taught to assess your environment. And in here, they are taught, for example, let me go to a technical one. The limit of unsuccessful logon attempts. That's a technical requirement. And down here, it says potentially you could interview system or network administrators. Potentially. That's typically the role or typically the team that is responsible for limiting unsuccessful logon attempts. And that's accurate. So System and network administrator. What we did then is in FutureFeed, we listed out all of the individual roles or teams that that document called out. So here's the system and network administrator one. And that role role is called out under these 79 requirements in that assessor's guide. So there's the 318. So it's a pretty good chance that all of these 79 controls here, looking at them, are pretty technical or have some sort of technical implementation, and your system and network administrator is going to be involved. Okay. And so that's what that populate button is you can quickly build some of these teams here that are called out. And, if you have a training team or HR team, incident response team, and then these teams end up being tagged as responsible in the RACI matrix for those requirements. Okay. And so you'd build the team, assign the people to the team, and say, hey, you now have to go look at these controls that you have been assigned as responsible and evaluate if they're implemented. Give me some evidence if they are. Okay. So after you build out your, access, roles, teams, define the people, then move on to tools and documents. And in here, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. You're just going to hit the add button to log an entry. And, mission here, we're under tools. So mission is like the purpose of the tool. Okay. So let's say it's identification and authentication mechanism, or MFA tool, SIEM tool, firewall tool, switch. And then brand model is the specific. So we could give it a, Entra ID. And then is it on-prem? Is it in the cloud? Is it service provider provided? And hit add. So now I just logged that I use Entra ID for identification and authentication management, access control management in my environment. So that's what you're going to do is log the technology. So you will have to gather a list, just like you did a list of people. Do grab a list of tools and grab a list of documents that you want to enter, and then log them all in here. And then after you log them in here, open them up. So we could go to that one that I created here. Is this it? I don't know. And get responsibility assigned out. Get accountable assigned out. I would recommend at least getting these two, if not all of them. And then go to that connect area and associate, okay, why do I have an identification and authentication mechanism? Identify, let's see what comes up there. I would just start searching for the words. See what access, okay. All right, definitely for 311, definitely for 351, if it's over here somewhere. Didn't look like it, but you would just start connecting them, right? Okay. And now I'm building out that evidence, that proof that for 311 and 351, it talks about controlling access and identifying people. Well, I'm doing that with a tool called Entra ID in my environment because it's more automated and it's helping me. So that's at the very least. So I'm going to leave you with this because I got to wrap it up, but log the people, then move on to tools and log them. Move on to documents, log them. After you log them, open them up. Try to get the R and A filled out and the connect filled out. And that's like the basics you need to get started, I would say. Then go back and start working on filling out all of this other metadata, creating tasks. So here I've set an annual incident response task. I created one. You just assign new task, name it, give it an assignee, and make it repeat. So think of all those things that need to happen. Annual risk assessments, annual incident response tests, weekly or monthly vulnerability scans, quarterly change control review boards, all those things that need to happen throughout the year. Go ahead and start making those tasks in here and setting them up and getting them assigned to the right people and defining the activity that needs to happen. So that way it gets triggered. The person will get an alert. Hey, it's time to do this thing. They'll log into FutureFeed and they're going to have maybe the worksheet they need to fill out or the checklist they need to fill out or whatever have you. But when they go in here and close a task, it forces them to provide evidence that they did that task. So whether they're filling out the form or they're attaching an external report or screenshot, they have to at least log some evidence before actually closing out and marking a task as complete. Okay. So that's how you're going to start making your documents operational, is creating tasks. And if your document isn't ready for operational yet because it's still in draft, then start creating tasks about finalizing the document, review it, edit it, make a task to get it marked approved and signed off on. And then start setting up that continuous modding, recurring tasks. Evidence, when you create tasks or when you complete tasks, then that completed activity and the evidence you logged shows up over here. And then you could add any other additional evidence that you want to along the way. Connect is where you're establishing connection, and I'll cover this leader follower at another time. But just start exploring that overview. You could see there's other metrics you can get. Okay. Same thing with tools. Like you could set tasks over here. Like I have my vulnerability scanner one here has a task to do a weekly vulnerability scan. So the people that I have assigned as responsible for vulnerability scanning tool are also the people that I have doing the weekly vulnerability scan and then marking them complete, uploading the results, and closing them out over here. This is a fake environment, by the way. So, okay, that's the training for today. When you're ready to sit through the second session, go ahead and sit through it. If your environment's pretty blank right now, then I would work on defining people, getting your tools logged, and getting your documents logged. When you're wrapping that up, then go ahead and schedule for the second session. I'd be happy to walk you through it. Or, if you need to sit through this session again because you have more questions, you started doing the work and now you got even more questions, then jump back into this session and ask more questions during this session, or join that 15-minute with FutureFeed session that's with me every Thursday. Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Does anybody have any questions?
No, thank you. That was excellent.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And no questions for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, well, I'm going to end it. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you in the next session.
Yeah, you also. Thank you.
As well.